welcome to another episode of a Wicked Parley. Tonight, we're going to be discussing crazy. Is everyone crazy? Am I crazy? Are you crazy?
I know I am.
Hopefully, we're going to be taking a look at that tonight. Boy, do we have a hopefully fun and engaging episode for you guys. I think it's also important and fair to say at this particular junction that crazy as an overall definition, before we even get into definitions, is very subjective. We may use
insanely
the word... Insanely so, yes. And it is also a construct of both culture, and it is going to vary region to region. So what is considered normal and sane and whatever metric you want to call is going to be entirely contingent on where you are in the world. And also note that I mean no offense by any of the things that are discussed in this particular thing. So with all that being said, let's jump into tonight's episode, and let's start off with definitions. What do you got for us, Rose?
We've got a couple here. The first one is, well, the opposite.
Sanity.
Sanity. Hey, jinx. So the quality or state of being sane, or soundness or health of mind. That sort of thing.
Okay.
I'm not. I'm pretty sure I'm not. For a couple scenarios.
Who is? Honestly, at this point, who is?
The next one is the opposite of this one, or about insane, or exhibiting a severely disordered state of mind.
Yeah. And disorderly state of mind, just for those to clear things up just a little bit, it means activating... it means being uncouth. It means acting in a way that is significantly different from the rest of everyone and what would be considered normal. So,
yeah, acting away from the norm, or depending on the culture, that also depends on the culture of which is the norm.
Yes, it is.
Fun. The topic of today's episode.
Crazy.
We're going to be using quite a number of them, to be honest.
Oh, dear God, yes.
So, there's the offensive one, which is having or showing severe mental illness.
Yes.
There's the one that's unable to think in a clear or sensible way.
The one we're likely going to be talking about for most of the time.
And then a more kind of, depending on the situation, kind of lighthearted one, wild and uncontrolled.
Yeah.
It's like depending on the circumstance, like if you have a wild party.
Yeah, or like a person looks at you with wild animalistic intent. Everyone knows those eyes. We know them.
So, we'll be sure to clarify whenever we mention something's crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll try.
We'll try. Who knows?
We'll try.
We might be relying on social cues, but those are also different.
Yeah.
The next two are dealing with later topics, actually, one of which is fear.
Fear.
So, which one do you think marks today's?
I think number 4. Reason for alarm or danger. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I can see it.
I think that the other one is number 1, an unpleasant or often strong emotion caused by anticipation of awareness of danger. But I think that a lot of times with fear, danger isn't always present. I think the anticipation and the strong emotion is relating to fear and the anxiety that it induces. Those are the things to me personally I think of when it comes to that. Like when I was a kid, although this sounds silly because I'm like this giant guy, I used to be afraid of the dark. And so I needed some sort of light source, even if it was like a small little dot, in order to feel comfortable.
Fair. I can see why you prefer number 4 then.
Yeah,
reason for alarm. It's just something that makes you jump in your skin sometimes.
Yeah.
And the last one is phobia, an exaggerated, usually inexplicable and illogical fear of a particular object, class of objects, or situation.
Yeah, and know that when we re-talk about this subject in a future episode, we're going to go into more details surrounding phobias, but for the instance of this particular episode and considering the fact that like we're just introducing the topic, we're not going to go too deep into it. So like if you think of something like arachnophobia or agoraphobia or something along those particular lines, know that we will not be using those particular terminologies. We're going to be saying fear of spiders and whatnot. So, you know, just so that way people know.
Yeah, I also forget like a bunch of them, like the tenophobia.
Yeah, me too. Like 100%. Like I have absolutely no clear idea of every single like, you know, fear and its, you know, namesake and whatnot. So
take a look at that gosh darn car.
yeah, that's crazy. The thumbnail image is also insane to think that how high this guy's up and he's just like, I'm upside down on a motorcycle in the sky. Totally normal.
Hi, host.
Hi, host. It's,
happy to have you.
It's good to see you here. Finally. I'm Chef Show.
We did miss you on Wednesday, though.
Yeah, did we though? I don't know. It was nice having very few people watch. It was good.
Alright, so while we discuss today's episode, we have another video to show.
Do we?
Yes! This one! Well, okay. Funk.
Okay, there we go. Hey.
There we go. Ta-da!
Yeah, ta-da!
Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Kind of a crazy looking game, and also, how crazy did you find the game? Like, was it kind of wild? Was it unstructured?
I would say that it was fun and structured, but there were some really weird things, like particularly the idea of sticking like a robotic tail up your ass to fish. Yeah, like, you know, instead of like throwing a fishing rod like a normal person, Goku thinks it's a good idea to get a tail made by Bulma and stick up his ass, and then dip the tail in the water and shake his ass around and wiggle it around the tail to lure a fish in. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, that happens.
All right.
That,
we're gonna go ahead and let that play then.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so let's jump into the episode's, questions and whatnot. Talking points.
So, besides the definition that we pulled up for formality's sake,
okay.
When you think of the word crazy, what's the first thing you think of?
I think of silly circumstances and situations. I think of extreme people, you know, doing some things that would be considered outside of the norm. You know, people. I think of crazy as in like, okay, I'm gonna jump out of this perfectly normal aircraft and parachute down. Like to me, that's
skydiving.
Crazy. Yeah, skydiving. It's just, that's crazy. Will I do it someday? Maybe. You know, I wouldn't say never, but I would say that like to me, it's just a crazy notion, right? I would also say that some people who just start like, you know, shouting at random people, you know, is something that also jumps into my mind as crazy and borderline insane. Or people who sit in a corner and start talking to voices and then start offering things to imaginary people.
Why is this just
because it's weird and I don't know what's going on.
I don't know. It just seems to be frozen.
It's not. I assure you, it's not. It's playing. It's just slow. Anyways, yeah. So that is the gist of what I think is crazy.
Okay. Yeah, for me, it's just mostly people going out of their way to do potentially dangerous things. Like, I know that's for some people it's a profession to swim with the sharks. But like swimming with that amount of teeth near me, it's like, yeah, they can leave me alone and stuff, but like, oh boy. Last Sunday's dream.
Really?
Oh my.
It wasn't that bad.
But like, doing something going out of your way to do something dangerous. Sometimes I find it crazy, especially if they do it just for essentially shits and giggles.
Really? Okay.
Like I think there's this one area, I forget where it is, but it's essentially a bridge made of glass. It's a hard glass and stuff. Sometimes I find it crazy, especially if they do it just for...
Weird.
What the heck did you just do?
I bumped something. I don't know.
My.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. Weird.
But yeah, sometimes it's a bridge made out of glass, and it's a hard glass, but you can jump on it.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of terrifying because sometimes it will just crack even though it's not going to break. So that's kind of terrifying in a crazy kind of way for me.
Yeah, no, that sounds like very scary to me personally, actually. Yeah. And so I can see how you could say that's crazy. Yeah.
Anyway, let's see. Because it is kind of subjective, if you had to put the term crazy into several categories and whatnot, what would they be and why?
Okay. So I think the first category that I think to acknowledge when it comes to crazy is things that are completely out of the spectrum of normal. So this is like deviant behavior, things like that, that I think ultimately would be the defining thing. And that would be characterized mostly by, like I kind of mentioned in my previous definition about how someone might speak to another person or might argue with themselves when there's no one there. Any sort of thing that interferes with their ability to function in daily life and any routines that might be going on, I think would be evident of someone who's technically crazy. And like to me, I would define that particular thing as its own thing. Then I think like there's the other type of crazy, which is like the more, I would say, mild version of that, because I think it's definitely kind of like on a spectrum of sorts, and so it could be like either really good or really bad. It's kind of hard to tell when it comes to that sort of thing. But I think on the lower end, it's its own thing as well, and that's kind of like where somebody kind of maybe acts and does things in a way that is in alignment with someone else's kind of beliefs, and so in that particular way, you might run into that. And then I think another form of crazy is kind of like what you're kind of alluding to when it comes to people doing dangerous things, like thrill-seeking behavior, things like that. I think that also is kind of crazy. There's a story, that I told you before we did the episode that maybe we can do that kind of shows like an example of someone doing something that seems like straightforward, but it kind of flirts with that edge of being kind of like crazy, and then also kind of doing something that's an extreme behavior. Although. You mean you want to do it now, like the story?
I mean, do you want to do it now, or do you want to do it later?
I'll give it after the question. After I've answered the question, I'll do it. And so when it comes to the other form of crazy, I think there's like the extreme form of the thrill-seeking behavior, which leads to people doing things like jumping out of airplanes. People who want to mountain climb. I think those are all examples. Is it just freezing too much?
Yeah, it's been on that one screen that entire time.
Ah, okay, that's what's going on. Okay, we need to fix that later, another day. Anyways, okay, so sorry about that. There'll be no game footage tonight. So it's gonna be a pretty boring chat. Sorry about that, guys. We're not that interesting. Anyways, so okay, like I was saying, jumping out of airplane, climbing Mount Everest. Doing things that puts your life in danger, to me, also is indicators of being somewhat crazy, in a different way. I also think,
we're not trying to be offensive. This is just opinionated.
Yeah, not offensive. Maybe it is, but I don't mean it offensive. That's what I'm saying. I'm just trying to say, like, indicate like there's a difference in these behaviors. That's all. And I also think that like when it comes to what people do and say can also be kind of crazy. I think the idea of putting, like, I don't know if you've ever seen the situation where somebody does something that's just so ridiculous that it compromises their ability to survive. Like say like a married person, okay, who has no job, no career, no nothing, right? Cheats on their partner, and their partner works, has all the money, and now they've compromised the relationship that allows them to have a certain level of comfort in their life, and now they become homeless because of their stupid action. To me, that action is stupid, but the whole premise is crazy.
Yeah, that does sound like a crazy scenario.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something you would normally find yourself in, so...
No. But I just, to me, like, those are the things that I kind of associate with crazy. So, do you have anything to associate with crazy that you can answer this question yourself?
I mean, those different categories seem to, like, put it down pretty well. Like, those are, like, what I would classify them as, and then the only exceptions would be the extremely crazy stuff, which, actually ends in death. Like, I don't get some magician's tricks sometimes, because, they always have to have people behind the scenes just in case something goes wrong, and they sometimes go wrong.
Yeah. And
like sword swallowing.
Yeah, no, you're...
Congrats, objects. But why?
Sharp objects down your throat. Why? No. Bad. Oh, God, no.
Like, that's more of a terrifying kind of crazy, because, like, oh, so much can go wrong.
Yes, it can. Yes,
and then, of course, those more death-defying stunts, like, there's one clip from a Got Talent show where somebody was essentially put themselves in a straitjacket. They tied a rope around their feet, which got pulled up, and they're now hanging between this giant bear trap looking thing, and the only thing holding the bear trap together are these two ropes to the side, and the assistants set those ropes on fire, and it's up to the magician to get the heck out of there.
Talk about pressure.
So I look at that and I find that not only insane but hecka crazy, because it's like, you're gonna die if you don't do that.
Yeah, I definitely, yeah. Well, I mean, or be horribly maimed. Like,
oh yeah.
I think like that's the other thing to consider. I think that like when we talk about crazy and we talk about different things, I think there's probably a several list of things that can be discussed. I think we can talk about like whether or not a person is, of the right mind, in the sense that is there a difference between crazy and being just insane, and where does that line blur? And so when you talk about like a magician who does some sort of insane stunt, or like something like crazy, like jumping across the Grand Canyon on a motorcycle, or like doing some sort of like what we consider crazy stunt, okay? Like, are the people who are conscious, or like, I'm making this decision, I'm doing this particular thing, is that technically insane, or is that just like just a crazy notion that we just would find totally ridiculous? Like, where does that line actually interact with? Like, I think that like there's a big difference between something like that and like being called crazy and someone who's actually like lost sense of reality, like their ability to interact with the real world and know what's real and what's not real, I think is completely different and should be separated from that. And so when we throw out the word crazy, like, it's important to remember that it has so many connotations and is so overly used in language, at least in North American media, that the true definition of it sometimes gets blurred with the story that's usually attached to it.
Yeah. So, let's see. Do we want to continue, or do we want to do the new thing for today's episode?
I think we want to do the new thing.
Yeah. So, because we know that an hour is quite a long time for people to sit down and listen, we're going to have a small 2-minute break.
A small intermission, so that way you guys can see what the topic of what we're going to be talking about next looks like, and you guys can think of questions and interact with. And also, if you guys are like, hey, I want to go to work, well, there's a pause for you. So
we're going to see y'all in 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. Okay. So, we're back from the break. Although I know that you guys didn't get to see the actual like things getting typed, it's totally fine. You're making sounds. You're making sounds. Okay.
I am making sounds.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Oh, that was a little funky to look at.
It was funky to look at, but we're working on it. This is a work in progress. So that's one of the new things we're going to be adding. So that way, people have easy to spot stopping points in case they don't want to watch the whole hour-long program. So.
All right. So the next thing, if people were able to catch that last bit of the break, we're talking about the distinctions between the different levels of what we find crazy.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, what do you think the distinction is between what people consider weird versus crazy? At what point does one move from one category to the other?
Well, I think the difference probably has to do with severity. I think it probably has to do with a whole bunch of like details that indicate one way or another whether or not a person is, let's say, out of their gourd, if that makes any sense. I think, as I kind of was mentioning before the break, we kind of like were going through a few different levels of crazy, and we were giving the distinction between someone who has lost their frame of reference with reality and what's going on when it comes to, doing a crazy stunt. Like there's this distinction that's different, and I think that the difference is that a person is able to still understand where they are in the universe, in the world, and they still have a sense of self. While I think someone who's really lost their gourd is probably someone who is absolutely 100% unable to really know when, where, and who and what they are. So at least to me, that's the distinction. That's the clear thing.
Okay.
So, and
hi, Kyle.
Hi, Kyle. Welcome to the episode.
Welcome. Yeah, that would be a good distinction because there's just the level of weird, but then when it gets into dangerous territory.
Yeah. That's
when it's a little more terrifying and should probably be considered crazy.
Yeah.
Alright. So if that's the case, how much do you think culture really plays a role in what we deem insane versus sane?
Well, first of all, I like I mentioned earlier in the episode that I think that culture is going to dictate what is considered normal. Where you live, what you do, how you say things, are all things that you parrot or mirror other people. And so when you start acting and behaving in a way that is not consistent with the people whom you surround yourself with, that's when you start to be considered potentially, I think, crazy. I mean, I remember in the early 2000s when anime started to really become big, and there was the beginning of cosplayers in America. Now, cosplaying had been a thing in Japan for a long time before it ever came to the States. And when people started dressing up like that, there were all these people who's like, well, that's weird. Why are you doing that? And I mean, me being a silly, a teenager and young adult, I used to wear like a hat from Bleach that was Kisuke Uhara's hat. It was like fisherman hat with like green and white stripes.
Oh yeah, that one.
Yeah, and a weird kind of pattern. I love that hat. And I used to get weird looks on the bus. Like I'd ride the bus to school, and I say to school, I mean like to college, and public transportation. When you're wearing something that looks that weird, you get funny looks, and random people start asking you questions about really weird things.
Okay, then that's a little. Sorry, I'm just getting reminded of that story, and then another story that I showed you on a Tumblr post.
Oh yeah.
The one with the python on public transportation?
Yes.
Goodness gracious.
Now that is crazy.
I'm like, I'll explain it to people if they want me to explain it later.
Yeah, maybe later.
Maybe later.
Maybe after the next break.
Yeah.
When it comes to the overall question though, culture decides what is socially acceptable by everybody, right? And then it's the job of the people that are in the immediate area to follow through with that. This is why, crazy like hairstyles and clothing styles, how they change over the years. And for whatever reason, we've just decided that, no clothes is better than clothes. Like, as you see, like everyone, like, it's like if you're wearing clothes, it's got to be as tight as possible. We leave absolutely nothing to the imagination. But like, if you go to, like further back in the past, you find that there are similar trends, but there's also trends that just show like different things. And so it's like, the further back you go, the longer the skirts get, the looser the pants get, that sort of thing.
For me, I don't typically get the thing for tight pants besides, apparent eye candy, but I'm looking at those going, how do you get in and out of those quickly? Especially for skinny jeans. I always get stuck.
Yeah. So what Kyle is mentioning in the chat, for those whom will watch this episode in the future, is absolutely correct. However, as I mentioned earlier...
Which one?
Well, what he said is that in abnormal psychology, he learned that deviant, dangerous, dysfunctional, and distress were things that were necessary to be considered, crazy or whatnot. And the thing is about those particular things is that in the next episode that we talk about this particular subject, which will not be for a couple of months probably, I will go into the details behind that, as well as discussing phobia in more detail. But for the overall talking points of tonight, we're going to be dumbing down the language and using more simple, more direct, really relatable things, because I don't want to get too out of the way. So
yeah,
just a heads up to anybody who sees that in the chat, and to the chat itself. So.
What do you think of host's comment? The whole weird is more socially unacceptable, generally not harmful, and unintentional, while crazy is not normal and, quote, subjectively intentional. Let's see.
Yeah, I read the thing. It's interesting, to be honest. Like, it kind of goes in the same line of thinking that I've been kind of putting forth, but it goes a little bit more into the details of it. I don't think host is wrong. I think that he's onto the correct path. I think that the issue with talking about it from that particular perspective is the fact that everything is so subjective. It's not going to be the same across the board in anywhere you look. It's going to be a little bit different every time you look at each group, and it's going to be different every time you look too. So it's not just like, oh, this group is forever always the same way all the time. It's like, no, actually that group is going to be different each time you sample it, and it's going to be different in each area. So it's very difficult to pin it down, and so that's the problem with talking about it in that particular way, because at the end of the day, like, you look at, like, say, the UK, right? The UK had a huge punk scene in like the late 70s, early 80s. And then that punk scene like got twisted and adopted, and then when it came to the States, it was like all the rage, but it didn't happen until like the late 80s, early 90s. And then you see the same trend happen in Japan, but it didn't begin until the late 90s, early 2000s. And then you see the same punk scene that had happened then come full circle back to England roughly about 5 years ago. So it's like...
It seems like the trends just move to different countries every couple of years.
Yeah, what happens, I think, is that like something happens culturally somewhere, and another group latches onto it, finds that like interesting, and is able to like, it speaks to them in some way, and then that particular thing migrates to further and further and further, and each time it migrates, it takes its own identity and like has the identity, but then adds to it and then changes things. And so that's kind of like I think where the subjectiveness comes from. And so when you talk about something that's considered crazy, and you talk about something that's like you look at something as the norm. This is the thing that's happening in this group, and this is what's normal. And so this person who's not doing the same thing as the group is crazy. That right there is subjective in so many different ways that I can't even begin to untangle that in this episode. So I just like understand that I'm
details.
Yeah, I understand that I'm aware of it and that I can speak about it, but like it would take too long to go through each one of the things. And yes, punk never dies. Punk is awesome, and I still have a pair of like plaid pants like from back when I was in high school that have like a chain on it still. I'm just like, those are my fucking like, I love those pants. They will never be thrown out, no matter how many holes that are there.
Goodness. Oh, all right. Do you want this particular question or the next one?
Whatever you'd like.
Let's go ahead and move on to this bit, shall we?
Sure, yeah.
All right. So, what are some instances and examples that you can think of where maybe being called or even considered crazy is more of a good thing? And feel free to define for each of those instances what type of crazy you're talking about, because again, subjective, many definitions for that thing.
Okay, sure. Okay, so one of the first things that jumps to mind, and that's just because I'm a huge nerd, is that Einstein, when he was talking about the theory of general relativity, he was literally called crazy by virtually every person who ever looked at it. And it took like a series of astronomers to go and look at specific stars to be able to try and prove his theories right. He was thought of as insane before. No.
He was thought of as insane.
Yeah, he was thought of as insane, and his ideas were crazy. But the truth is that it wasn't, and because he was such a like out there kind of person, it spawned a whole level of people who are willing to take risks and be considered crazy and on the fringes in order to progress science. So, and that's one way someone could be considered crazy. I also think that anytime anyone does something revolutionary in any field of any kind, it could be in sports, like a crazy play,
Oh yeah.
like that's awesome. Like maybe like some sort of change in performance for, like, say, if you're racing cars, that might be considered crazy to do something weird with like the layout of the engine, and everyone says it's wrong, but like ends up making the car slightly faster. Then like, hey, those things are considered crazy, but if they work, then they work, right?
Yeah, they work and they work. You get a lot of inventions because somebody was, quote, crazy enough to think about them.
Yeah, or like you can look at like the development of the light bulb and how many tries it was. I mean, after like the first couple hundred, you would have been crazy to continue, but you get to over 2,000, you're like, yeah, okay, just keep on at it. It's like that's a bit nuts. It's a bit nuts. And then the list goes on and on and on with people.
It absolutely can, yeah.
Who makes and changes and all these sorts of things. But I'm gonna say the one last invention that's absolutely crazy: the craziness of how the chocolate chip cookie came into existence. It was a complete
chocolate chip cookie.
It was a complete and total accident.
Wait, what?
It was an accident.
Sounds like tea.
I mean, tea.
Spill the tea about the chocolate chip cookie.
Do I want to tell the story of the chocolate chip cookie? I think not. I think not. I think we'll do that like later when people actually when more people are here to talk about things. Like that,
okay, fine.
Yeah, I'll tell you later, like after the show. And for those of you who want to hear the chocolate chip cookie, it will appear on Patreon. So support us if you want. If you're feeling particularly generous, go for it. And if not, then maybe you'll hear it later at some point in the future. Anyways, maybe. There's a few other positives too, I think. I think when someone acts particularly crazy, when someone does lose their ability to interact with the rest of the world, that raises a whole hell of a lot of...
It raises a whole hell of a lot of...
Sorry, it raises a whole lot of questions about what's going on. And so when a person does act out in a crazy way, it leads to them getting help. And that help is something that can help other people later on down the line, so that those people don't have to struggle the same way that one person who was, quote unquote, crazy.
I can see that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like it helps out of the way. And listen, let's see what host said.
I'd like to think Einstein kept general relativity out of spite. Who's crazy now, Tesla?
Oh dear Lord. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Goodness.
Humble patent clerk.
Let's see. I'm thinking like the one thing I see that some people use, they mention it in a couple of Tumblr posts here and there. Somebody's trying to attack you. You don't exactly try for a crazy person.
Okay, I'm gonna say this right now. Like, if the best way to win any fight is to strip.
That alone is kind of crazy.
Yeah, no one wants to fight a naked guy or girl.
No, that alone is kind of, well, it is out of the norm. So
yeah, it's 100% crazy. But I'm just saying,
yeah.
Okay, you know.
Yeah, you don't exactly attack a crazy person. So that's always fun. Like, they're always talking about either you strip, like you just mentioned, or you act absolutely insane because you're already apparently effed. Nobody wants to f you up for that.
Yeah, I mean, start drooling, start barking like a dog, start scratching the ground, start panting.
Start frothing at the mouth.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I mean, like.
All right, so those are some potentials for, positive connotations where being thought of or considered crazy is a more positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
What circumstances would you say would be more negative to be considered, crazy or even thought of anywhere close to crazy?
I think there's a notion of any person who acts out of the norm as being dangerous. And so I think that whenever you think of something that is, like you don't expect, most people automatically jump to the notion of, because I didn't expect this must be dangerous. So this person, may be labeled as dangerous even if they're not. So, like for instance, like the whole idea between the whole frothing, at the mouth and barking like a dog. It works not because it's intimidating. It works because you become fearful of what you aren't sure to expect from. Like this person might go for my eyes. This person might, bite my ankle. Who knows how this person's going to come at me? And so it causes them a little bit of fear, and so that's why they'll disengage from a confrontation. So I think that, like, as much as that's a positive in that circumstance, it could easily be flipped the reverse for far more common cases. I mean, I'll use myself as an example. When it's like, it used to get cold. Like in Sacramento, I know it's crazy to think that, but there was a time, in the not too distant past, where it used to rain a lot and it used to be cold, and I had to ride public transportation while going to my first couple years of college, and so when it get cold, I wear a big black leather trench coat. And the thing about the big black leather trench coat was that it kept me nice and warm, but it also made me look very imposing. And and keep in mind, I wore that Kisuke hat, and I'm wearing like this giant trench coat, and I'm like 6'7", and so like I would get people to kind of like, they looked like they were afraid of me. In fact, like one person was like, I was standing on a bus, right, and that person bumps into me and literally starts like bawling, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, and I'm just like, I'm like, chill. It's fine. Like, you're okay. And like, the person thought I was just gonna snap at
It's
them.
like, I'm not a bad guy.
Yeah, and so like, I think that like that's, I mean, really being, even looking slightly different. There's a whole class of like of individuals that get thought that way, and they're not. And so I think that's one of the main negatives that I think of. Is I think that most people whom would be considered crazy, I don't think they're crazy dangerous. I think that that's a very small majority of people, and I think that's the biggest negative, and probably the only negative that's worth talking about, if I'm being honest.
Okay. All right. So, ready for another break?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe this time the chat box will work.
I don't think the cue card's gonna be fixed this time around.
All right, so next time.
So, all right. So, food for thought for the next part of the episode. We're going to be talking about crazy today versus in the past, and we're going to talk about the relations to fears and phobias.
And we might also talk about mental hygiene.
That too. So, keep a lookout, and we'll see you in 2 minutes.
Okay, and we're back, folks. All right. Obviously the break, you had some time to think about what we're going to be discussing. Hopefully the chat is interested. And
Seen a couple of things moving during the break, actually. It's more of like jokey meme things, I think.
Yeah, menacing. Oh man, you don't even know.
He's just standing there menacingly.
Yeah, just menacingly, just like, you don't even know, threatening people. Yeah. Yeah, me with my umbrella, my spooky umbrella. Yeah, like honestly, I would be more akin to like a Hagrid, with a Kisuke hat than a menacing and threatening person.
Hey. All right. So you ready?
Sure. Yeah.
So we mentioned how in the past, we had these inventions that came about because people were kind of crazy enough to think about them rather than going with the norm.
Yeah.
So, what do you think some of the main differences are in being called crazy today versus what was considered crazy maybe just a few years ago or even decades ago, if you want to go that far?
I mean, yeah, we can go as far back when it comes to that, really, as you want. I think that the first thing to note is that what was considered to be deviant behavior in the past, what is considered to be deviant behavior today, is probably the elements to look at. And I think the first thing to jump to is that like the social norms are so radically different. Let's just take California as just kind of like a normal thing, all right? Like as the thing we'll discuss. Because obviously California has its own culture and its own history and background and things like that. Yeah. Okay, and you can definitely say that like there's a lot less conservative things going on in California in comparison to other parts of the country. Mm-hmm. So like this is not going to be true across the country in all the time periods discussed, but we're just cliff notes here. So it was considered to be a little bit risque in the 40s and 50s to openly handhold in public.
Oh.
And it was really like, kind of like, oh my gosh, when someone would like kiss one another, like a peck on the cheek kind of thing.
Not like a full-up blown makeup session, just a little peck.
Yeah, and in comparison today, where if you're walking down the side of the street, it's pretty common to see couples holding hands. It's not uncommon to see a partner kiss another partner, and it is not unthinkable at all if you're enjoying a movie to see some teenagers just going for it in the back row. It's just like it's kind of par for the course. And while those things happened, the way in which they were observed and seen and stuff like that overall on average was dramatically different. Mm-hmm. And I think that like those people that do that today are seen as perhaps less crazy today than they would have been in the past. I think the other thing is that sensibilities have changed, and what we consider to be totally okay has completely changed. I mean, look at clothing. Like I mentioned before, the further back you go, dresses get longer, pants get looser, that sort of thing, right? The clothing is a way that it speaks to a society, it speaks to a group of individuals, it tells people like, well, this is okay, this is not okay, right? Mm-hmm. I can distinctly remember in about 2010 when I started seeing girls wear like basically spandex clothing that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. And I was just thinking, like, I literally commented to the person I was with at the time, like, so it's just totally cool for girls to basically walk out fucking nothing, right? That's basically where we're at. I mean, this is where we're at now. And I'm just like, okay, sigh, like really, like what the fuck, because you know what happens, right? It's like the moment that happens, then it's just like it starts hitting a certain generation of individuals, and then you start seeing the cascade effect. And so like I just knew in the back of my head, it was like someday I'm gonna see some fat fuck walking around like that, and it's just all right. I'm gonna lose my lunch. And sure enough, like a year later, it happened. And I was just like, oh. Sorry. Anyways, not trying to fat shame people, just be happy with who you are. But like at the end of the day, it's like Anyway.
Okay, then before we go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So I mean, that's probably the gist behind how far I want to really go with this. Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fair. So speaking of changing with the times and stuff, you mentioned punk rock switching locations kind of decade to decade to
Yeah, yeah.
decade.
Different cultures grab onto
Yeah.
different things from different places.
So, how fast do you? So, since obviously trends change, what we considered crazy also changes and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
How fast do you think this perception of crazy can change in either a culture or society, or even in just like a state, if we're talking about the United States?
Mm-hmm. Probably in like the blink of an eye.
Hmm?
I think like it instantaneously can change. I mean, like, all right, so like in the past, right? Like, here's what I think. I think that like the reason why it took so long for it basically to come around when it comes to punk rock has to do with how fast does information disseminate across the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so in the past, you had magazine articles and you had like music and stuff like that. And so it took a while in order for those things to get published, translated, etc. Right?
Yeah.
And then once they were published, translated, and whatnot, then you had to be able to order the products, which was its own wait period in its own way. And so let's say you were on top of things and you ordered it right away, right? Mm-hmm. You might be looking at like, 3-4 years down the line before you actually got the product, right?
Yeah.
Hypothetically. And so like I think that like that's the reason why you see a slowdown. And that's of course the past. Now we live in the digital age, the internet age. The everyone's got a smartphone in the back of their pocket. One tweet, one YouTube video, one TikTok video instantly could blow up and change the way the whole
viral
world,
videos.
Yeah, exactly. A viral video. It changes the way we perceive everything. And so culture moves so much faster now, and information disseminates in so many unpredictable ways now that I think in a blink of an eye is how quickly this stuff changes, which just adds to the problem of trying to discuss it in any specifics, because the more modern you discuss, the more quickly you have to change everything you're assuming about it. Or you're constantly looking at everything from a past tense and trying to infer from a past tense where we are now. And anyone who's ever done that knows that that's just a fool's errand.
Predictions and estimations are just that. They will not be fact.
Yeah, you can never approximate something so subjective. That's really what I think it boils down to. And it's because you can't account for every single action of every single person in the world at once. And that's what really shapes culture. It's everybody. Mm-hmm. Like when you go buy a coffee from a specific brand, you promote that brand. Well, that brand supports somebody who then potentially supports somebody else, and voila, you have this chain of people that have this influence, and they stem all from a collaboration of support from everybody. And so it's like, if you want to pull the plug, there's a shit ton of people you have to pull the plug from first in order for that to actually have any effect. So. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would make sense, because I was thinking like for an entire society to change and whatnot, it might take like a couple months.
I mean, as much as I hate this, I just want to think about this for a second. Trump became a global sensation overnight when he announced his presidency. How is that the case?
Mm-hmm.
It's because he posted it online. He tweeted it.
Yeah, fair. Like before the internet, it would take a lot longer.
Yeah, it would take way longer. And it's just that's the whole point. That's one of the reasons why I think like the internet is like when we had the discussion previously about is the internet to bring people together or pull people apart kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I had such a hard time with that episode because to me the crazy thing about approaching that subject was how do you accurately measure intention when it comes to a number that big?
Right.
And so I think that it was almost crazy to even do that episode, but that's a whole other thing. So.
Fair. All right. Shall we move on to the next thing?
Absolutely.
So, we defined fear and phobia before and whatnot because they are kind of related to what we consider crazy.
Yes.
How do you think fear itself relates to what we consider to be crazy or dangerous or weird or whatever definition you decide to use?
Okay. I think fear probably has to relate to crazy in the sense of scaling, its magnitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's to what extent are you willing to feel or react to something. So, you know, like a person who, you know, is like afraid of going on an elevator, right? Has a phobia of getting on an elevator. It becomes crazy if that person lives on like the 30th floor of a building. You know? And they're like, I'm going to just walk down the stairs to go to a grocery shop and all that stuff because I don't want to get on an elevator. That's fucking crazy, right? Like that's a huge impairment of their ability. And so, like, to me, I think that, like, the level of how much you allow fear to interrupt your daily routine dictates how crazy it is. And so, like, in the example of, I live on the 2nd floor and I don't want to go down an elevator, and you're like, then taking the stairs, it doesn't sound that unreasonable. But, like, when you compare it to, like, the person living on the 30th floor, that's a huge difference. So
that's a good question. I don't want to think about it.
Yeah, and so, like, that's what I mean by, like, how I think it's kind of, like, different. And how fear kind of relates, because if your fear is not interfering enough with what's going on, then truly speaking, it's not that big of a deal to call it to the point where, oh hey, this is crazy. But you know, that being said, you're gonna find loopholes and exceptions everywhere you look. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah. What about you? You got anything like kind of like a pops on your mind when it comes to this?
When it comes to like fears and phobias?
Yeah.
Let me think.
Host at 100%. Isn't that hilarious? Like, and it would always happen too. Like every time you leave the house, you're like, oh, fuck.
Oh goodness. What if somebody had a fear of heights, but they desperately wanted to travel places? Because like if you want to go like, you know, international, you have to use a plane.
Oh, well, I don't think you have to go on a plane, but I think the height thing plays in its role all the same. Because if you're going to get onto a boat, yeah, those things aren't exactly like at your eye level.
No, they're kind of like quite a bit above sea level here.
Yeah, that would definitely be an excellent example.
Especially if you go on a cruise.
I've never been on a cruise. I want to go on a cruise.
I've seen those multi-tier ones. Imagine like you get a room on the very top floor and you're scared of heights.
That'd be great. That'd be hilarious to watch.
I'm just imagining
I'd be eating it with popcorn. I'd just be like, oh, this is great.
Oh my gosh.
Will it go?
Now I'm just imagining like somebody with a fear of heights doesn't even need to be on a boat to travel anywhere, just in a skyscraper because they have to stay somewhere else for like a convention or a meeting or something.
Yeah, I mean like people who have those particular kind of problems, just so you know, like they actually do exposure therapy in order to treat that. So like they start off with like, you know, like say like fear of heights, right? They expose them to like a ladder and they're like, here's a ladder. You don't have to get on it, just it's a ladder. And then maybe like the next time like they come and see them, like I want you to get one step on the ladder.
Oh, okay.
And then and then they kind of work their way up the ladder a little bit until eventually they're like, okay, cool, we're gonna go to like the 50th floor, and on the 50th floor we're gonna open the door, and then on the bottom the floor isn't gonna be floor at all, but actually a piece of glass, and I'm gonna want you to look down.
That's not exactly that went from exposure therapy to here you are to the wolves.
I mean, it's not instantaneous, but like it's a gradual progression of things like that. So, yeah, but yeah.
Okay, so that's how you believe like fears and phobias are related to this?
Well, it's a way a fear of heights could be related to this. Like I'm not gonna say this is this and this. It's like no.
But like these are examples.
Plausible. Yeah, it's plausible that this could be the way it plays out. It's Yeah, I would say that like when you talk about crazy, we're talking about something that's, you know, the distinction between something that is on two scales. One scale is sane, one scale is insane. They're on two different, or a graph, a spectrum. Okay, and there's two different points.
It's a multi-dimensional graph.
Yes, multi-dimensional graph, and you're going to be on these different points. And I think that most people's lives, like whenever they make a decision, they're kind of they're teeter-tottering back and forth on this particular thing, trying to stay somewhere in the middle. Because I think everyone's just a little bit crazy, you know. Like there's you know, some people get a wild hair up their ass, and there's all of a sudden, you know, like, oh my god, you know, like I gotta go do this crazy.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
I'm not getting ahead of myself. I'm just pointing out this so that we can jump back to this towards the end. So, and it is near the end, by the way.
I know.
Okay. Anyways, so yeah.
I'm just thinking of the graph analogy though, because it's like there's so many caveats as to what can be considered like sane or insane, depending on what culture and what upbringing you have.
Oh my god, yes.
the type of graph we can imagine real easily is 3D graphs, but there's going to be way more than three different, you know, scales for this thing. So people can't imagine 4D graphs, 5D, anything above a 4 you cannot do.
I'll be honest, anything above a 2 degree, you've lost me. I'm sorry, it's the truth. It's like okay, cool. You lost me.
Gosh. Yeah.
I mean, if I look at it real hard, maybe.
So I'd love to like honestly discuss this in more detail because, to be honest, I know there's a ton of phobias. So I'm curious as to like which ones, might have more of an effect on others if there is one.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there. I think it's important.
I said later.
Yeah, I know that later, but I want you to understand this as well as our audience. Phobias are extremely like subjective is the best word to describe it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, there are almost as many phobias as there are people, and probably more. If I'm gonna be 1,000%. And so like, there's no common ground when it comes to what people are afraid of, and the reasons for why that fear is there. And the thing that makes them fearful, as well as the reason, is indicative of a different type of phobia and requires a completely different type of way of treatment. So it's like, if we really want to talk about this in a later episode, I don't mind it, but just know that like it's going to be as subjective, if not more, than this episode.
Yeah, I know, but it's just like I'm wondering like how much it plays a role in what that person considers crazy, like their list of phobias that they might have. Like,
oh, you mean like the actual person, the individual who's experiencing it themselves?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's actually a little simpler. I thought you were talking something totally else. I was like, all right.
How complicated did you think I was trying to be?
I mean, I didn't know. Yeah, I mean, the answer to that actually has to do with the culture in which they inhabit. So, like, let's say a person is like, I am deathly afraid of hot dogs. All right? Okay. Like, I'm afraid I'm going to choke on a hot dog.
Okay.
And they're an American. Where hot dogs are a pretty common thing in like diet, and so like to some extent, like if you go to like a baseball game or some sports thing, you're gonna probably see a hot dog offered. Yeah. And you have this fear of choking on a hot dog, right? The way in which that person perceives that fear is just as intense as if their life was being threatened, even if like they're not even like necessarily interacting with the hot dog, just the presence of it. Or another way you can be related to this is a person who's afraid of bees, like me. Like, I will climb over a person to get the fuck out of the way of a bee. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, I would, like, it could be the person I care most about in this whole world, and I would be like, fuck this, I'm out of there.
Get out of the way.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not even kidding. Like, it'd be, I'm done, right? And, that absolutely like is a fear of mine. It's a phobia of mine, but it's also linked because I know that if I get stung by a bee, my life is actually in danger. And so like I think that the measurement of crazy when it comes to fear is all about perceived danger. And that right there is the inline thing. And so like how much you perceive it controls exactly how you feel and think about it. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, last one for the night.
All right.
What is your opinion on the following? Do you think everyone is crazy or just a proportion of people? Doesn't even have to be like a small or big proportion.
As I alluded to before, I think every single person is crazy. I think everyone's crazy for a completely different reason, though, than I think you might initially suspect. I actually think everyone's crazy because everyone goes along with the insane rules that are commonly distributed throughout the entire world, whether they agree with them or not. Whether they follow them or not, they acknowledge the existence of these rules and to some extent follow them. That to me is crazy. Because there's no clear reason why you should ever follow a rule, other than people telling you that it's for the good of other people or for yourself. So, yeah. I'll leave you with that little cookie.
I like cookies.
Yeah, cookies are good. All right. So, I'm assuming there's nothing else for you to talk about?
Not at the moment.
More questions? Okay.
No.
All right, then. Well, everybody, I hope you had fun. I hope this was entertaining. I hope this has sparked some more questions.
It's a little bit of a crazy-looking episode.
It's a bit of a crazy episode, I'll say that.
The pun.
We will definitely have more. We'll have a better slide situation set up on Saturday. Not Saturday. Next Wednesday.
Today's Saturday.
Yes, today's Saturday. Sorry, I'm losing track of my days. I'm going crazy myself. Look at that. Okay. Yeah, but so Wednesday will be better, hopefully. We'll be discussing anxiety, and we'll be discussing like how it affects people, how it's treated, and we will be going into some details, unlike this particular episode. Just because we've talked about anxiety briefly before in other episodes, and so I feel like people are ready for that kind of discussion. And I'm not talking down to you, so hopefully, you get that, you care. And also know that we'll be doing some sort of streaming stuff later on. And yeah, so have a good night, everybody, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Till next time.